Test, test. There we go. I'm a little rusty, right? Gotta make sure I pressed all the buttons. If I forgot one, guys, shout at me. I'll have a look in chat every now and then. But guys, welcome to episode 98. Right? I know it has been a while since the last episode. I tried to line some up, but there was always something in the way. So and I didn't want to just just randomly do podcast. I want to make sure it's a good one. And with the current happenings, I think that's that qualified for a good podcast. So let me introduce the guests. Most of you guys will be aware, especially if you have listened to a few of my podcasts before. Shines has been on, I don't know how many times, 6, 7 times. But for those who are not aware, there might be like 1 or 2 guys here that don't know the Shiny boy. He's an alliance leader who built a reputation for being relentless. I think that's fair to say, right? And in the current situation with the war, I think that's you're kind of defending that reputation a little bit. And obviously, you're also like a good friend of mine, and I always value your input, like in all kind of ways. I talked about that yesterday actually on stream too. When it comes to theory crafting, you would always be the first guy when I have like some weird idea, like a doctrine. I would just throw it at Shines, and he would be the guy saying either like, "What the fuck?" or like, yeah, maybe, right? So when I get a maybe from Shines, I'm gonna stick to it and keep going with it, and then maybe every now and then, I mean, 9 out of 10 of them. Like how many of my ideas that I threw at you? What do you say? What's the percentage of that we never did actually?
I think there's like 50-50, but when they come out, they're like amazing. But it takes like a day for it to sink in because it's not conventional fleet warfare that you're doing. It's like, yeah, if we land like 250 Maguses on these guys, they're gonna go all over the grid. It'll be great. It takes a while for the tactics to sink in, but it's good.
You know what? Yesterday I said, it's probably 9 out of the 10 ideas I have to like scrap at some point. But maybe you're right, 50-50 in terms of what we try at least, right? There's also a couple ideas that in theory work, then we try and we're like,
I think there's a lot of fits and stuff will go back and forward, yeah. But there's like the different tactics like Bush Ravens and Maguses and stuff, and it's always interesting.
Yeah. So that's guest number 1. Then my second guest today is someone who is more known to be like more of a specialist, I'd say. He used to be in Goonswarm, but he is now more on the smaller scale of things. But he likes to use the bigger toys for it whenever he can, right? Obviously, we might just talk about that in a minute too. You can't always use them in today's Eve. I guess it's very tricky to use them properly and not, get rid of them right away. But yeah, his group, the group he's in, is fittingly named Anti-Crab Coalition. Yeah, welcome, Vex. How's it going?
Thanks, Panda. Yeah, I think it's pretty fitting you talk about losing your supers as the person who so far has fed the super. That was the super that died yesterday or the other day. So.
Wait, you lost the super?
Yeah, we lost our first super. I might have fed it to a dread bomb, just by accident.
I know a thing or two about whelping supers and titans.
Yeah, it was a tactical feed. Is my defense. Everything you can ask the guys. Everything was fine until it wasn't fine.
But if that risk wasn't there to lose the super, nobody would be interested in fielding them anyway. I mean, or like it wouldn't be exciting to field them in the first place. Nobody would be talking about it. You know what I mean? So
that's the whole reason we use them. It's about playing aggressive, right? We want to play the game in a I'd say like as extremely of an aggressive way as possible. So
yeah, I think the underlying threat has to be there. Otherwise, who gets excited for that? But then again. 100%. You see a lot of risk-averse behavior in the game too, so, some people might think differently. So for some people who might not be familiar with AKC, the Anti-Crab Coalition, you want to, kind of give us a little bit of an introduction. Like, what do you guys do? Like, what's your usual? I know right now is a bit of a campaign, but what's your usually like day-to-day life looking like over there?
So AKC is actually predominantly just a group of about 5 people. It's predominantly full of there's a guy called Nicty, we've got Solara, we've got Lowland, we've got Steven, Raven, a couple other folks as well. And the general premise of the group, if you go way back, was it was one of the, I'd say, larger groups that provided blocks, like in it, for example, and like Goons, and me when I was an FC in Goons, this was an advantage that I was able to use. The intel information to be able to go and use Kikis. This is like post Rockall nerf, when whaling was a little different. It was a little more sparse. It was mainly Shvo kind of pushing it from the init side. This was the group that were extremely active with like spies and all this kind of things to go out and kind of get the intel to be able to drop targets, and that was the result. And I'd say like the last year and a half, 2 years of whaling content, a large majority of that has had some hand behind the scenes from some of the guys sort of in the group.
Yeah, I think I saw the beginning of that relationship of like Init and then you guys, right? I worked a little bit with Lowland and you and Nick T. I'm not sure, did I work with Nick T a little bit? I think so too. But I was like at the end of my Kiki hunting times in Init, I guess.
Yeah, that's kind of when it all kind of started. Like we had a pretty big Discord going, and then like Deck, Lowland, like the Nick D, Sol, Show a lot would form many a Kiki fleet. So that was kind of the main premise of the group. Was we went out there and we found stuff to kill, and then we worked with blocks, which was predominantly Show through Init, and then myself in Goons to be able to go and kill those things. And that resulted in a lot of frags for both those alliances and surrounding groups and good times. More recently, that has pivoted into we want to play more aggressive. We have more. A lot of us like just frankly have more adult responsibilities now, so we don't have the time to dedicate to playing Eve like continuously every single day. So we wanted to kind of look at, okay, how can we apply that, but also do it at more intense time commitment, i.e. over like a 2-week period where you're really playing like 15 hours a day, but in exchange of that have like a really small, like big goal, but like a small campaign time. And that's where kind of I'd say like the new version of AKC kind of formed, where I'd say probably like October last year, we had what was called the Anti-Goon Whaling Club, which was the kind of group that was formed to, at the time, aggressively hunt in Delve. And through that campaign, we killed about 805 bill, to my knowledge, in Delve and surrounding Imperium space through that group.
Bad.
And then it was about 3 months of kills. And then after that, we then packed up shop, and we are now here enjoying the fun times in Omist as part of the war.
How did you get roped into that? Or maybe we should talk about like how this entire situation with XIX and so on came to be. But it's a kind of a weird step for you guys to hunt and delve and then be successful and stuff and then pack up and then suddenly fight on Init side against XIX. But maybe Shines, you wanna give us a little bit of like a short like history like of like how did we end up at this spot like with XIX? You want to do that?
Yeah, I mean it goes back to the war mostly, like the World War B or Vietnam or whatever you want to call it. And
I always call it the big war.
The big war, the big one. In that war kind of initiative after we lost Fountain, we had some decisions we needed to make, whether we were going to pull back to Delve and then whether we were just going to defend Delve with goons or what we wanted to do. And we figured that the best thing we could do, because you, me, and Bliss discussed this. Obviously, we didn't want to leave the Imperium. It wouldn't have been the right thing to do. You have to stand by your allies and all that. So we decided to pull back to Delve. We moved all our assets into Delve, except 2 Titans, which got caught on a gate.
Got caught. I mean,
anyway, we moved into Delve, and then we kind of didn't want to just sit in Delve because the war wasn't exactly on the Delve front, and we didn't think that was the best use of our time. So we sorry, I have to conduit jump out of fleet here, and I'm just waiting for the signal to show up.
What does it want? A chance of still seeing the fleet a little bit to get him home. Don't double plate your keeps those guys. That's cruel.
So we deployed kind of around the place a little bit. We sorry, food has been delivered as well. Thanks. We deployed down to Curse and a few different areas, but basically one of the things that kept happening was that we would set up some structures and then Pappy would come and ref them. Which is fine. Look, they didn't want us going aggressive in their space. We cleared out a bunch of legacy space, all that kind of stuff. It was all great, and then we would jump clone back to Delve whenever we were needed. Eventually, when we got to Curse and kind of set up in Curse, Fire would come in and ref the structures, which again is fine. But what pissed us off was that they would wait and they would call in Pappy, then like 1,000 Pappy coming to Curse to kill like an Athanor. We'd be all geared up to fight, and that's just the way the war was, and it's fine. But the chest beating that these guys done, holy fuck, the chest beating was insane while hiding behind like 1,000 people. And that never really sat right with us. So after the war, then the war ends, and we are back in Fountain. We're rebuilding. We're kind of sitting there, and everything's a bit boring. Approaching Christmas because nothing is really happening. So we decided to deploy in January of last year, 6 months after the war had ended. About 6 months after the war had ended, and we said, why not go for Fire? So we went down
Wait
for
a second.
Fire.
But wasn't that so? That's about Esoteria, though, right?
It was.
So,
initially, it was only about deploying for content, but as it turns out, people were getting pushed in an impasse, and then we did kind of AOM was falling apart then in Esoteria. So we kind of merged it all into the one thing.
Yeah, to make sure there's like blues in control of ESO. That's but like because someone asked the question, like I get asked that like every now and then, like what is happening right now and stuff. And I always start with like, technically, and it started deploying to make sure like Esoteria is in friendly hands, right? And then kind of from there it developed, right?
During the war, one group that had kind of continuously helped us out on timers, whether we were winning or losing. I mean, Goons did as well, but we didn't really want to ask Goons for help because every time they left Delve, it left Delve open. So we would prefer to just fight outnumbered outside of Delve and let Goons do their thing in Delve.
Yeah,
but one group that would continuously show up for us was RMC, the Red Menace Coalition. And they would always show up to help in whatever numbers they could bring. So with Esoteria falling apart, I kind of convoed Dodger and just said, look, Esoteria is going to shit. Do you want to move here? It might be better space than Impasse. They said yes. So kind of it tied in with the deployment that we would get them set up down in Esoteria.
Yeah, and I see, like when we deployed to Curse, like our job was to drag the enemy over there, right? That was 90% of our job. And then dragging Goons over there would have just been the opposite of what we wanted to achieve. So yeah. And then what? So we did that.
So we done that. A lot of obviously Faith Abylis and all those regions border Esoteria, so it just became the natural escalation, I suppose, that we would push into Faith Abylis, and we had some really good fights against Fire. Again, like there was a lot of. I felt it was super toxic. Maybe that's me just being a bit too personal about it, but they just weren't. They weren't likable, if you can put it that way.
Didn't like
there was a big drive. Yeah, there was a big drive then from in it to just keep pushing their space. That went on in different variations for about 7 months, from January down until August. We deployed with a SIG, and then we deployed the whole alliance, and then we pulled back, and then Goons decided they wanted to invade. Mittens convoed me and said, hey, we're doing this, so you in? I said, right, okay. We'd only been back in Fountain 3 weeks, and then I was like, hey, sorry guys, pack your shit up again, we're deploying again.
Dude, do you remember, like, after the first one, I was like, after a while, I was like, man, I don't know. And we all had the same feeling. We were like, I knew the tricky situation of like, we kind of committed, but we kind of aren't. Like, that wasn't really the plan. The good fights, they're gone, like, since Horde deployed and stuff like this.
Yeah.
It was just too blobby and stuff, so there wasn't really that much to do. But then, man, you said it, right? You didn't like the guy, so I had like, I felt like, oh no, are we gonna get stuck here? Is Shane's gonna be like, no, till the end of days, you're gonna be fighting here? But then you decided, like, no, this is not worth it, right? It's no good fights. Nobody really enjoys it, and we like, who cares about the space? So I was so happy when we were back in Fountain. I had like some plans and stuff like this, right? But I kind of had to like, I didn't FC a whole lot at the time already, so I kind of wanted to get back into it a little bit, and I was like in the process of getting back into, and then suddenly it's like mittens, like, hey, we're deploying supers or some shit, right? It's like, my God, no. But yeah, and then suddenly we're in the same fight again, but this time with goons.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
like a lot had come out since. Like there was a lot of stuff behind the scenes. Fire had obviously surged out of their space. They had retaken everything that we had taken, which is fair play to them. And a lot of that had gone unnoticed by the Imperium because this was very much just like an initiative and some SIGs from goons. And there wasn't really any major investment in it outside of us just wanting to shoot fire, because RMC had already been set up in Esoteria at that point. Um, and then fire started to push on impasse with Horde, and Dracarys ended up losing a keep star that we weren't able to get in range of to defend in 68 FT. And kind of at that point, Mitten's head started to turn towards like the eye of Mordor just started to turn towards the southeast. And there was a conversation had, and we basically said, okay, we'll go, but like this, we're not half-arsing this. We're moving everything, Super Titans, and we clear this out because I don't want to deploy again in 6 months' time. And he agreed, so that's what we did, and it went well for a while. But then obviously there was all the drama stuff that happened around July, I think, last year. And then obviously Horde and Pappy and not Pappy, Horde and PamFam and everyone else deployed against us, and that deployment ended up just kind of we hit a wall,
Yeah.
and at that point we had been deployed for 7 months and we didn't see any way forward. So I just kind of said fuck this, and we took everybody home.
I always wondered if you think back, when that deployment happened, and then Mitten stepped down and Asher took over. Asher made that statement of like, yeah, we're gonna take every fight and stuff like this, right? Like, very outspoken about it. Do you think that was a mistake? Because I always think like, man, that kind of gave Gobbins the green light to say, hey, we deploy and we can just sit here and be the defenders, and they have to come to us because they said they would. If they don't, then they look like they're not like Asher's not a man of his word, kind of, I felt like that
Yeah.
gave it that extra bit of oomph behind the Horde deployment.
I look. I don't think it's. I think anything that anybody says, like even everything that I'm saying right now, like given the history on it, can be turned against me. So I think I don't think it was the wrong thing to say. I think Mittens has some very big shoes to fill, and
I mean,
coming out
Asher.
strong. Sorry, yeah, Mittens' boots were very big. That's what I'm trying to say. There. Asher had some very big boots to fill. Yeah, correct. He, to come out with some strong statements and like encourage or reinforce the fact that Goonswarm was going to be fine was very important. So I think what he done was right. But obviously, anything that's said publicly can be thrown back in your face very quickly. It's kind of like I wouldn't put it as severely as what Villy said about the extermination stuff, but it can be used in the same manner that we use that against Villy.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah. I guess you're right. You can always find like a way to use it. Yeah. And then that ended. And why are we back again? Like, what happened? What changed? What
So at the
changed?
end, there was conversations that were had, and this is all public now, so like it's fine to talk about it. There was kind of goblins that reached out to me from Pandemic Horde, because they didn't really want to prop up fire. I didn't pry too much because I didn't want to get him super defensive or anything like that. But you can see all the reasons. He's listed them now in his pings. They're on Reddit, of why he didn't want to have to deploy to help fire. So kind of at that point when that conversation started, Initiative and Goons had pushed in. We had taken all the space again in Fatabulis, Omist, Tenerifus, and we were starting to push on Imensi. We had dropped our keep star in on the border of Imensi, and it was looking like we were going to roll over fire. And at that point, I got conversations from Securitas and Goblins to see could we work something out. Um, what Goons and what the Imperium wanted on like the higher level of things was to have our borders secure. So we didn't want groups to be coming in and hitting our stuff like on our borders every day. So we were trying to create buffer space, I suppose, around our areas. Um, and we weren't getting any fights because obviously we outnumbered fire quite heavily with the full Imperium there. Um, so I kind of said yes, that's fine, but it's going to cost them. I think I asked for Imensi, Tenerifus, and Fatabulis, which were the regions we had already taken, and we were about to take Imensi, would be left empty. That they would be that the blocks would not move into them, and that they would be left open for smaller groups to move into. But Imperium wouldn't move into them. Horde or Pappy wouldn't move into them. And that would create a natural buffer space while at the same time opening up space for groups to move into that wouldn't be hostile necessarily to either side. They went away with that. I think they had a discussion with Fire, and that got rejected flat out because it was too costly. And then obviously Horde and PamFam deployed, and then unfortunately Goons got headshot for a week, and then the deployment kind of fell apart. And at that point, when we were pulling back, I didn't really have any cards left to play. We were starting to lose the regions that we had taken, and myself and Gobbins had a conversation because he was quite interested in having at least some regions that would be open for neutrals to move into that wouldn't be block affected. So we had a conversation basically and said, look, if Fatabulis if can we agree on Fatabulis then instead of all the other regions? And I felt that it was a starting point, at least something we could work from, and that's where that went. So they got Constantine to agree, to the best of my knowledge. Obviously, I didn't see any conversations. I wasn't part of those conversations. It was I was speaking on behalf of our side, and Gobbins was speaking on behalf of his side. But everything looked fairly okay, and then basically Constantine rejected it. He said that he needed the space and blah blah blah. Gobbins asked if there was any way we could work around it, and I said no because Initiative essentially would have become the Fatabulis police to defend fire. So the idea fell apart then. And then
So
a couple.
one sec,
Yeah,
like
sorry.
Fatabulis, people are gonna wonder. Like, I wondered. Like, I didn't quite understand why Fatabulis, but at the time, you have like it was cleared up and nobody was in there. Nobody was living in there. It just like happened to be that region that's in the middle,
Yeah,
kind of like open, right? So nobody like really needed it, and it was free, and that's why it's about Fatabulis. Um, in a perfect world, obviously, for newer alliances, you would want more access to like an NPC region, so people can actually move in there more easily, and not have to cross any soft and stuff.
absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, like look, Fatabulis was because like the truth of it is I had no more cards to play at that point. We weren't able to force PamFam out of these regions anymore. So it was just it was what was left, and it was a starting point that maybe we could work on again in the future. And I just viewed it as better than nothing, basically. But you're right, and everyone who has said it is correct. Fatalis is not a great region. It's not an easy region to get to, but it was a starting point, basically.
So, and then he says, no, we need the region, and Goblins felt betrayed. That's how it came to be.
Yeah,
So,
obviously there was conversations again had by them, and I don't know what happened in them, but there's some logs there, on Reddit at least, or in Pandemic Horde pings. I think Goblins has been fairly open about it.
And how did Vex and the guys? How did you guys get roped into this suddenly? Like, you were just approached saying like, "Hey, this is about to happen. You want to join in?" Or like, how did that come to be?
I think it was a two-part thing. I think, for lack of a better term, we'd farmed Delve pretty hard, and Shines has seen us talk about this concept before, mostly with trying to bonk Shvo on this concept of like sustainable whaling, whatever that is intended to be.
Shvo is talking about sustainable whaling.
No, we were talking to Shvo about trying to.
I started that conversation in that Discord. Remember, I was trying to slow Shvo down. I was like, dude, if you kill everything that moves, like there's not going to be anything left in a week or whatever. And then Shvo's like, yeah, you're right. Yeah, remember? And then Shvo goes like, yeah, he's right, guys. Yeah, maybe we should, make an effort of like leaving some like supers alive, so not every super that undocks thinks like I'm gonna die in 5 minutes. And then what happens the next day? It's like 3 pings killing supers all day.
3 Kikis. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like I'm like I tried.
To be honest, the EVE community who's not blue to initiative should thank us for deploying, because Shvo calms down every time we deploy for a bit.
Yeah, maybe it's all just a conspiracy. Goblins just wants to save the supers on our side, so he's like talk to you to get you deployed, so to stop the Shvo, so his supers can just make ticks.
He's a spooky man. I think I don't think anyone will debate that. He's very spooky, but that's the conversation that we were all having, right? And then with Delve, we kind of like started ramping up in Delve more, and then obviously when I left Goons, and we kind of started ramping up what at the time was called the Anti-Goon Whaling Club stuff. Like that got pretty big. I mean, I think at one point we had like 150 people on a Discord, and we were like dropping dreads every week. It got pretty big in terms of scale. We had like groups from all over the game with jump glint set and like whatnot. So it was a pretty nice tool to be able to get a lot of kills. But what we found was that the number of marauders that we were killing, because that was a big thing, we were just dropping like 10 marauders, 10 blops on every marauder that moved. We were dropping on every super, we were dropping on every dread, we were dropping hypers on all the dreads, etc. We just found like there was, well, it was less that we got predictable, to be honest. With all due respect to Goons, like they didn't really do much to stop us. Like it got pretty ridiculous at what we were able to get away with.
It's the cost of doing business for them, right?
They just stopped undocking, right? Like the reality was that like the general narrative that we heard from just reading in like general chats from different corps was that, oh, you should just go and use your capitals in ESO or Paragon Soul because it's safer to crab there than it is to crab in Delve, right? Because
you moved there.
I don't know if anyone actually moved there, but like we didn't really follow them. But like the point here being that like we were at a point where, okay, like there really isn't much left for us in Delve anymore.
It wasn't that sustainable, huh?
Yeah, the concept of sustainable whaling didn't really apply. We just fragged everything. I think, as I said, it was 800 build killed in like 3 months, which is just pretty good going for, again, what was started as a group of like 5 to 10 people. So we actually announced, much to I'm sure the joy of Shines and Co, despite our good relationship with Fountain and the Init guys, we announced that we're going to go to Fountain. We're going to take all of the guys that we have here. We're going to ship up lobsters to Fountain, and we're going to go and try and apply the same thing we've done in Delve, apply it to Fountain. I think I didn't do a lot of this personally. This was around the time where I said, hey, I'm stepping back from the game for a bit. I need to go and like do some IRL stuff because I just moved across Atlantic from the UK to Canada. So I didn't do a lot of the Fountain stuff personally at all. But the general feedback I'd heard from the guys was 2 things. A, when they crossed the regional with us with supers, the number of crab beacons that they saw that they could drop on like dramatically dropped, like the dreads that they could drop on with their supers. And then B, just generally like respectfully to Init, you guys are a much more pain in the ass to drop on when it comes to blobs. I know I heard Lowland molding 2 days in because gating dictors and signers around was far more painful in Fountain than it was in Delve. Like in Delve, we could gate everything around, and basically we would just get ignored, and we could drop on stuff. And like there were times where you would drop supers or something, kill it, be safed up, and be logged off before a response fleet would form. Whereas in Fountain, we found that like, oh, if you gate a recon around, like 10 angry Kikis are going to show up and try and kill your recon straight away. So,
yeah, I think generally people underestimate how important that is. Like, it's usually FCs or people that are very involved with the fleet and stuff that are moving the dictator, the sneaky dictator for that op in an hour, or the scout or whatever, or the or the signer or whatever. And to kill that dictator or that recon at the right time, man, that can be so fucking painful, right? You never know where that scout just came from. Maybe he had to travel that scout like 30 jumps out, and stuff like this. So, having little camps, and that happened to me plenty of times, right? Like having that little camp that just catches that one dictator here, that one dictator there, man, that's already so painful for like hunters and stuff, right? I think that's
extremely frustrating.
Yeah.
If you're in the Fountain Intel channel though, and somebody gets reported, and if you watch the B170 Keepstar, you can already see like Hellgast and T-Grads and all these dudes just undocking corp fleets to go and try and catch these people. It's great content for people, but yeah, I mean, it's going to add to all that.
Yeah, there's some specialists for this kind of stuff. Yeah, some people are always on the ball with it.
That's the difference, though, I think we found between Fountain and Delve, is in Delve, their home defense was very blops based, and us being in blops and doing what we do, like you're just not going to catch us by tackling a marshal on a gate, because we just know, oh, that's Mike, we're not going to do that, or that's Vintage, we're not going to do that. So with Fountain, it was like, oh, there's just a lot of dictators and like small nano stuff running around. And to your point, Pando, it's extremely frustrating when you're trying to like gate dictators and log off dictators for supers later in the day, and like you're just like gating into dictators 24/7 that are killing your dictators. It's not frustrating in the ISK loss. It's just the time and sanity loss. I mean, as I said, I distinctly remember joining comms one day and listening to Lowen mold for 20 minutes because he'd fed like 3 dictators and a recon because
exactly
T-grad guys were camping a gate.
And sadly, I know exactly how that feels. That happened to me before. Like, you're setting stuff up, you have an op in like so many hours, like, but you need to move that sneaky dictator in, right? And then you want it next door, but then you can't really. And then there's a little camp here, a little camp there, and then there's some relentless. You know who was always a pain in the ass with that? Was always the Chinese guys up in back in the day. They were in
VVV, Vendi, VC.
Genau, yeah, these guys. What's the region called again? Next
Cobalt
to Chino.
Edge.
Cobalt Edge, correct. Yeah. Those guys were always such a pain to move stuff around. They were always having a camp here, camp there, and then they would have like a handful of guys just hunting you. And then even if you manage to just get to the Destiny and log off, you then they know exactly you locked off there, and they give that intel, and then your chances of success later on just go down, right? So it's like there are certain groups that are really, oh man, just a pain to deal with, right?
I think it's underrated the impact that small corps undocking small like nanoships and just general like home defense stuff can have on larger home defense like harassment happening in your space. Like simply just undocking the dictator, undocking a few kikis, whatever, actually has a huge impact. And I think that's like what, if you were to compare, again, like we're comparing here, sort of Delve to Fountain, that's the big difference. I will say this is really funny. Waking just tagged us all in a message in the same Discord from this is like October 2021. We said, Lonely said it's been about 4 months of almost a Rorke a day. Pando, you said after the massacre that went on for the last month, I think it takes a year or so for the Rorke population to recover. I'd say a month is a good start to see if there's any effect. And you coined it No Rorke October. And then immediately the next day, we went and killed everything.
Exactly. I was just like, you know what? I wasn't even aiming for it to be like a constant thing. I just wanted to at least do the science behind it and have like a no Rorke month, like where we don't go out and hunt, and then for everyone to see the data. Maybe I was wrong, because I mean, if you look at it now, Shvo is still going crazy and he's finding targets every day. So maybe I was just not right with it anyway. So maybe there was no point in like slowing down no matter what. But
I think it's the quantity of targets though. Like back then, we could undock our spies and stuff and find like 5 different options in an hour. Whereas like now, it's like you could undock your spies and you find one option,
Yeah.
one good option a day. So it's the quantity of targets is definitely on the lower side, which is, I guess, a nice segue into how we're in Omist, because basically the conversation that happened, which is the second part of why we decided to leave Fountain pretty quickly, was Waking had decided, I think, to ping about us like every day or something in USTZ.
I
So
saw
like
one
every
or
day
two
it
of
was
those picks.
it was a combination of your home defense was really annoying, and then every day you guys were taking the megaphone and going, "Hey, these guys are here, fuck with them," right? So those two factors, it was like, oh well, this is just kind of annoying. Like we're not saying we want it low effort. Like I think people get a lot of joy putting the effort in, but it's also like, we don't want to deal with like the constant like counter harassment. It was just, frankly, it was just much easier just to go back and farm Delve if you do again compare the two. So the conversation, to my knowledge, was very much Shines, you kind of come to us and said, "Hey, we're gonna go do this thing. There's gonna be content here. Like maybe you guys could kind of look over here." And then we had equally said to you, like,
Smooth.
"Hey," which was a very smooth attempt from Shines. Like,
I'm not scared of you, but could you go somewhere else, please?
yeah, it's like a polite way of saying, "Hey, if you could just look over there, that'd be great." And then from our side, it was like, "Hey, if we could make this work for us, then like A, there was a little bit of like this could be really funny, and then B, it was hey, we could probably make some money and get some frags." So what we ended up agreeing was, hey, if you set us blue, like we'll set you blue, vice versa, the collective Imperium that is, and then if you kind of give us a chunk of space, we'll just go take care of that chunk of space for you, so that you guys can focus on actually what your priorities, your war priorities, without spending time like glassing regions that are, in the grand scheme of things, not relevant to the outcome of the war, but regions that still need to be dealt with, and that being Omist in this case. So we agreed that we would go down to Omist, we would glass Omist completely, we'd deal with Eastwind, and then Shines and obviously the rest of Init and other groups, like I know Dracarys are down now, IGC are down, etc. All of those groups could go focus on hitting Faith, Tenny, etc., kind of covering in from all of those other angles, so that ultimately you guys could get to your end goal quicker, which is where we ended up being in Omist.
I think similar to what you said, the nano guys in big groups are underestimated or undervalued. Same goes for small groups that can just work on their own, are completely undervalued too, right? It's such a useful thing to have. Like even if it's just a small group, I don't know how many guys you got right now, but let's say like you have like a 20-man fleet. A 20-man fleet on their own, they can do all kinds of shit. To just like, they can tie up 100 dudes on their own. Like that takes 100 dudes out of another fight. You know what I mean? It's such a useful thing. Or to just say these 20 dudes are so active in this region, they just keep that region from keeping the ADMs up. So by the time other regions are being grinded, that ADM is so low, it's going to be like a 2-day job. And we've done that before within it, right? Like grind an entire region in 2-3 days. If the ADM is low, no big deal. You can just like flip that super quick, right? I think small groups, they have way more value to them than people might think. And that makes me so sad whenever people say like, oh yeah, it's a natural thing that like every group always wants to just be bigger, bigger, bigger. I would just love to like, it would be so nice for people to see it more like that, It's better to have like an independent smaller group or two rather than like one big group that has to do just one thing that's like not very flexible and stuff.
That's actually one of the main reasons why the Shines, can you go look over here, kind of worked for us, because at face value, like we could have stayed in Fountain, we would have had to work harder, but we probably would have got kills.
But you also knew Init is not going to be home mostly, right?
Yeah, we knew Init's not going to be home, and like a lot of us, like we love the guys that were all involved in the anti-whaling club stuff, but like that was getting to a point where it was getting pretty like, all right, now we're managing Horde and telling Horde SCs like how to play the game respectfully. Like some of them are not great with the whaling stuff. You're like batphoning Horde fleets, you're dealing with this, you're organizing these guys. It's just like there's a lot of coordination, and there was a lot of like just like micromanagement of varying degrees. So one of the big things that was like, oh, this makes sense for us is we are like 18 people, and we just thought, okay, if we call this group to like 18 people that we really like playing with, that we really want to log in and play with in really short, intensive bursts, and then go and take a break for 3 months to go and do IRL, and it's fine, nothing's gonna just disappear and be bad. That's a win for us. That's going to be enjoyable for us and how we want to play the game. while also allowing us to play the game in a super aggressive way. Which is how, when we were evaluating Noma's decision, it was like, okay, this kind of makes sense. Like, there's content here, great. Okay, being blue is going to be hilarious because it's going to allow us to A, move really easily, and B, we know it ruffled a few feathers, so added some added fun there. And then I think most importantly, the bottom line was it got our very small group consolidated of 18 of us into a place where we could do 2 weeks of like extremely focused, very long days. Like I know a couple folks took days off work, for example, and it was like, okay, let's go really hard and let's just crush Omist and crush Eastwind. And the result was, I think this was funny for everyone. I remember we sent screenshots to Shines when we moved in. We moved what was it, like 23 supers and 4 titans down to Omist, and then supporting subs from our group of 18. And then what was it, like we set 110 timers in the first 24 hours. So
It was
That's
crazy.
crazy. That's crazy.
Then I said, "Fuck this!" and pinged in it and made the equivalent amount of timers in Faith. You can't be outdone by like 23 supers.
yeah, it got pretty ridiculous with these one. I mean,
Did you
that's how
follow
Omist
up
has
on
kind
all
of
of them?
started.
Did you follow
Yeah, we
up?
did.
Because that's usually the struggle, right? You can make timers, at your own time. Because, like, obviously you can't, like, can't show up at the wrong time for the initial one. But then to follow up on all these timers, now you're on a clock, you know what I mean? That usually gets
This is where
tricky.
the alarm clocking comes in, right? Because what happened was you got a bunch of guys in like EU and USTZ at like reasonable times who would just like go around and bash stuff. And I mean, Almost was like dead in those TZs. Like literally, we were gating around supers like no care in the world. Like there was nothing. It was completely dead. And then all the timers would obviously roll to CNTZ. So like we'd be waking up at like I don't remember when we hit the keep stop the first time. We ref the keep stop with like 15 supers. I remember Nickty waking up at midnight so that he could get online and give us an extra super to ref the keep stop. So there's a lot of like alarm clocking, like very try hard Eve to make it work with turning up the timers. We had to re-roll a lot, like we're still working through timers now, but for the most part, we've been killing everything that we hit. I mean, the latest number that I looked at after today, and obviously recent events, we've been stirring up a little bit of fights for everyone. Is we've killed 475 bill in this campaign so far. So it's what 2 weeks in. So
That's not too bad. That's not too bad.
Decent number.
Yeah.
Albeit I fed my super in the process, but hey, it's fine. That's what SLP is for.
Since so there's the CSM summit is coming up, and I kind of wanted to ask you guys, and I probably will at the end. Like, what do you guys think? Like, what would be a big thing that you would wish would be talked about at the summit? I feel like one thing, obviously, people know. Like, I'm not a huge fan of citadels, but thinking about it, like you guys grinded down all these citadels. What do you think of like a drop rate on citadels? Like, not saying Keepstars, Fortizars, Astros, which are supposed to be staging citadels. I'm not even too much after those to have like a drop rate. I would probably be okay with a 10% one or whatever. But if it's 0% on those, I'm still fine. But like, what about like industry citadels? Like, shouldn't there be something of value dropping? At least to an extent. But what do you guys think?
Well, stuff already drops from the industry stuff if it's in build when it dies.
Yeah.
So once it goes into, but you're talking personal assets that are just chilling in station.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you kill a Sotio of a big group, let's say, you kill the primary XIX Sotio. Shouldn't that be a big enough target that's hard enough to kill to then drop something at the end? I don't know. 50% drop rate?
At the very top end, I would agree, like in that context. But for me, where this is a more important conversation is when you think about it from the risk versus reward and income perspective of smaller groups. One of the things that I've seen from comparing, I've pretty much spent my entire Eve life in Goons, pretty much up until leaving, in October, November. One of the things I've seen is really challenging for a lot of the small groups that we now work with is making money through activities in null for those groups who hold small amounts of SOV is a real challenge for them. And making the risk and reward of going and pushing in a region and bashing some structures and killing a strategic place of Satio or something else isn't really worth it often in the grand scheme of things. because the cores themselves aren't worth a lot usually.
I never
And
understood
obviously
the core thing, honestly. I never
so
understood where that's coming from.
I think when you ask the question of like, should there be a drop rate or something, it's like that's one way of solving it. But like the bottom line is whatever the change is, in my mind, the change should be prioritizing making it worthwhile to get out in space and fight over things more often, specifically catering for smaller groups to be fighting more. Because right now it feels like the game is very catered towards very large format kind of set piece fights for groups the size
But wouldn't
and
that
scale
be the
of Infinity and
case?
so forth.
See, the idea is the idea of the cores that we have is that whoever puts up a citadel has to like have something on the line, and whoever kills it gets something for it. But
it's just not worth enough.
Yeah, like in my opinion, it's not worth enough for any bigger group, because like it's peanuts for one single guy. Like if you could solo a citadel like that, yeah, sure, it would be worth it. But like also it doesn't scale with the amount with the size of the target. The target is not the Sotio or the Astros or whatever it is. The target is the alliance that holds it, right? So if there's an init or a horde citadel and you kill that thing, it's a bigger target, right? It's harder to kill because the group is bigger. So it should scale with it. And the only way to scale it with that is to have a percentage drop rate, in my opinion, right? Like there's no other way that I see, at least.
I think there's a couple of ways you can look at that. I think the fact that it wasn't introduced from the start with citadels means that they can never really introduce it because it's already been that way for so long.
I understand, yeah.
The other thing I would have is right now, you can look at what's happening in the south right now, like Initiative and Panfarm are pushing in on fire. They have no real chance to defend things. Like they are defending stuff here and there, like jump bridges and stuff, but if we want a Sotio to die or a Keepstar to die, it's going to die, and there's nothing they can do about it. Now, there's the reason for us doing that right now is separate to anything to do with drops or loot or anything like that. But if you're a small group and you're close by to bigger groups, and suddenly you have structures that have a chance of dropping loot, there's a reason to go wipe out all the little guys.
But there's also a reason. There's also a reason to hit the bigger guys suddenly. It's a better target. There's better loot drop, right?
It's a dangerous game though, because what happens is like if we look at the current war, right? You look at Eastwind. There's a great quote from I don't know if this person is anyone in Eastwind beyond a line member, but I think there's a good summary of like the current situation from the small group perspective versus a larger group. Is like the Eastwind guys in Omist, all of their holdings there. When they've been posting, and there's a quote that was posted today in their Discord when they were talking with other fire guys. They said, "Hey, we have this Fort Azar that's coming out today. Are we defending this fort or not?" And then someone goes, "In Omist, what have you been smoking?" And the guy turns around and says, I know, no one cares about small alliances. We're not big like Razor." And that's what we've seen like consistently from the Eastwind guys, where I would actually give them a lot of credit. Like they are, in the grand scheme of things, a smaller group than Fire and the other sort of Fire member groups. No one has come to help them. Their shit's just been rolled.
Maybe we should you should just tell them to move to Faith Avalus and build up again.
I read that quote on the Discord. If you scroll down a little bit, Vex, you'll see another Fire member saying something about you didn't pay your rent or something stupid. Like
it's ridiculous though, right? Because it's like they are a group where they actually have active people in NTZ. They are trying to grow. They are trying to contribute and build something for the game, build a community, and they are like now they're going to lose. In the grand scheme of things, a lot of ISK, even in current terms, in terms of the structures. And they've had no help at all.
Yeah,
like, even the traps they set to punish us, they did everything themselves. They funded the dreads, etc.
I was going to say they've dread bombed you twice, which is more like that's more of a statement than anyone else has put up.
We are very impressed the fact that like a group to their size and scale spent like from what we understand, pretty much a week planning to dread bomb us once, and then tried again a second time, using from what we now have been able to confirm, all of the remaining dreads they had in the region to try and kill us because no one else came to help them. Like if that's not an attempt, like that's credit to them where credit is due, right? But again, it comes back to this kind of concept of like, should you go after a bigger target, smaller target, etc. Like, how does that dynamic work? Like, the small guys get screwed in these kind of situations,
Well,
right? Because even if you increase the drop rate, right? If you increase the drop rate of structures, then doesn't that just make it even harder for small groups to want to go and establish themselves in somewhere like Faith, where it's not connected to NPC?
So that's why I distinguish between staging citadels and industry citadels, right? Because like whenever you say citadels, they're always put into one big group, but actually you should say engineering complex and refineries. But obviously, like if the rule was a drop rate from the beginning on citadels, it would be, the behavior would be a different one too, right? People wouldn't put that much of their assets into a Sotio or into a thingy, which is one of the reasons why Supers and Titans, like the whole debate of like why Supers and Titans, the proliferation and stuff, like it's the safety too, right? Like Sotio is super hard to kill, like the damage cap, the 3-timers and stuff like this, you know, like that's why they were so fucking, you know, that's why everyone jumped on the whole Citadel thing, because it was so safe. And asset safety on top of that, I think it was just an overkill, right? So yeah, I think if you change the rules, the behavior would change too, right?
Well, I mean, they've done that. Do you remember when they changed the abandonment to
yeah,
be
it wasn't well done. Yeah.
Yeah. I just feel like Eve would lose so many players from.
Yeah, you have to also do it right, in my opinion, right? So let's just assume CCP goes out and says like, okay, we put a, let's say 25% drop rate on all engineering complexes and refineries, and Sotio, and Keepstars, forts and so on, they stay the same. Okay, they keep their asset safety, it's all the same. But then they would have to give everyone enough of a grace period, right? Saying, okay, this change is coming, and it's coming to at this day, right? Let's say 6 months from now. It's a long time. And then in 6 months, from the day of the announcement, if someone didn't log in since before that announcement, it's still, that person should still have its asset safety, because obviously that character, that person, is still under the old rule set, right? So if that guy then logs in a year after the actual change happens, his shit shouldn't be gone, okay? It should be in asset safety just as he would expect, because he didn't pay attention to the Eve news if he's not playing Eve, right? So I think there's totally a way to avoid the shit show that they had in, like, with the abandoned thing in HiSec and so on and stuff like this, right? I think there's certainly a way.
I think it's very hard to implement those kind of rules though in a player base now that like does have a very big split between the more casual player who is just, you know, joining their fleet a day from their pings and maybe doing a little bit of mining or a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but for the most part like taking it pretty easy, versus the people who play it maybe to the level of activity that we play it here. That kind of change, it would be extremely damaging potentially for those casual players who maybe they don't log in and play for a few months. So you'd have to have something like a mechanic where, to what you're saying, like you're protecting that player that's not logged in. But I just, I'm gonna be a doomer, I guess, but like I just don't see that type of mechanic being something that we'd ever see actually implemented, unfortunately.
Yeah, maybe not. I was just curious what your take is.
I think the level of rage quit from people would be too much, that we would just lose a lot of the population of Eve when it went wrong for them.
Yeah, 100%. I think once we get below a critical mass, like the game's going to really struggle, right? So
yeah, I mean,
we've seen it in the past.
How much of anyone's personal assets are in a Sotio or Tatara or whatever it is, right? Like, so I'm not asking for 100% drop rate either. So, like, how much can you realistically lose of your stuff? I think it's
trillions.
I mean, yes, trillions, but trillions for a multi-trillionaire is not the same as a billion for like just a billionaire, you know? It's like,
yeah, but you as an FC and like most of the three of us probably as FCs don't keep our stuff in Sotios and stuff like that. But I can tell you the industrialists who are in Initiative, for example, have mountains and mountains of stuff that they use industrial structures for. So I don't know. I think it would be shooting ourselves in the foot.
Yeah, like, but yeah, I mean, obviously, yeah, I don't want to get stuck on this topic, but like I said, I think if that rule was implemented, I think the behavior would obviously change, right? People would say like, okay, I know this is like there is a risk to it now, so I gotta be a little bit more careful. And then but yeah, whatever.
I think if you take it back to where you very first started, which is like topics of CSM, I think the summary for me would be whatever the mechanic is, whether it's something that impacts structures or is an entirely new system, there needs to be something that encourages smaller groups to be out in space in a more consistent, regular cadence. We go back to the very first bit we started on with saying, the guys in Fountain are out kind of jumping in, doing home defense regularly. Ways to incentivize that more and make it so it's not just a cultural thing within one specific alliance, but is consistent across the board would be good for the greater health of the game in my mind. And then hand in hand with that, making it so that smaller groups in nullsec and in lowsec can have regular income streams. I think solve both of those problems because they do go hand in hand. And generally, you're going to see more ships out of space, more things blowing up, and everyone
Yeah,
having
but how do we
good...
achieve it? That's always the question, right? Like, what kind of change do you think would achieve that?
So one thing that I have thought of on and off is, the way you've got missions or achievements in the game already. What if, as a corporation, there was like a corporation LP store, and you were able to set like for example, Initiative done the bounty program. You remember the bounty program over the deployment,
Yeah,
where we said if you kill a miner, you get X amount of money. If you
I
kill a
got paid
rat, you
out
get X
once.
amount of money. Yeah, I mean, one of our guys made 16 billion ISK by himself over the course of 6 months. So 16 billion ISK in bounties. But if there was an in-game mechanic to allow that, so if you say, well, if you kill X, Y, and Z in Fountain,
You
you
get
get,
in it LP,
yeah,
and
or
then
you
you
get a
can,
payout from the Alliance wallet,
and then you
or
have an
something like that.
LP shop manager who puts items in the LP shop, and
Could
people can
be.
just buy it.
Or you might get Alliance bonuses for being in your space. I really love that idea, and I would hope CCP do it.
Alliance
But like,
bonuses to be in your own
yeah, could you
space.
imagine if you got like 10% damage bonus to NPCs in your space, anywhere with your solve? Like, how cool would that be?
You could
Like
even
these
make it simple
NPC
things like
changes that don't mean anything to PvP, but that would be super cool for PvE.
I don't know.
you could actually make it a win for everybody by simply saying those sites are worth more money. Because then also by increasing the value of sites, by encouraging people to be active, you're encouraging people to be even more active because the people who aren't doing the site content will go out and crab. The people who are crabbing will then get dropped. You then have more home defense opportunities. You have more people like me who go out and do the whaling. So you have those kind of fleets. You have the defense fleets to save the people getting dropped. Like that is, fundamentally like the good life cycle of Eve, right? You've got kind of everything covered there. So I actually really like that.
But as well, like there's other things they could do. Like I would love to see, and we've talked about this, Pando, from both sides of it. But like the bosun nerf, like undo the bosun nerf, get ratting titans back into havens, please.
Yeah,
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
please just do anything to
we
get
did,
supers and titans doing
yeah.
more stuff.
I mean, we did
that'd be great.
push for that, and we got the crab beacons out of it, right? So, and there are people running crab beacons. Is it quite as much as we would all love to see? I don't know, but at least we have crab beacons. But yeah, I agree. I never understood quite the boson nerf, like why that particular thing. I mean, at the time, supers and titans were kind of the answer to everything, right? And that always bothered me. But I always thought the boson was at least a skill shot, right? So it's like there was skill involved, like in landing it. So in a PvP environment, it never really bothered me too much. So yeah, and you could bait them, right? How often did we kill a titan that tried to boson us? Right? A couple of times.
I think CCP should have all the statistics for it, but like if you look, even just something simple like the increasing the BRM from 50% to 100% floor, like how many more people did that put in space? Like from me looking in, a significant amount. If I look at initiative,
I don't have the
like
stats, but yeah.
So anything that can do exactly what Vex says, just get people in space. It doesn't matter if they're making a ton of money, if they're putting risk into it. Like Bosun Titans are super risky, and they make decent this. They make what a crab beacon would make, but they're it's very risky.
Yeah, but also
it's
there is
fun
a
to
bit
do
of
as
a
well.
there's also a bit of a work thing behind it, right? Having the strons already there, you have to refill it all the time and stuff like this. So there's at least something there. You know what I mean? There's like, it's not just like free bosons all day.
Yeah.
You can actually see the impact of the BRM change in real time. We saw it when we looked at our kill board. because the number
There
of
must be
paladins that
stats in
were around
Grassroot.
Delph was like huge. Like he was a huge spike in the number of marauders that were around Delph.
I mean, if you look at you can look at the ratting bounties for a region. Like, it's not going to be a precise thing, but if the increase has been more than 50% in a region that's been super farmed already, then that should tell you that there, like, 50% or more, that there is people out ratting, like more people out ratting and stuff.
Yeah. So it is an hour. I don't know when was your timer? It's basically right now, but right? Didn't you say?
There's other people sorting it all. We've got a good FC team there.
All right. Nice. That's what I told you. Like, dude, just have someone else FC it. It's fine.
I know. Sunday night I like hanging out with them.
But yeah, I wanted to, like, one point I wanted to bring up too was faction warfare, right? So I kind of took a break from EVE during the whole introduction of the new faction warfare system. But Shines, you figured you would have a look at it, and you grabbed a couple guys. I was flying around with you guys like twice, I think. But what do you think of the whole rework so far, like faction warfare? Because I think CSM Summit wise, that's going to be a big. Obviously, we're going to sit there and talk about faction warfare quite a bit, right? So I would love to get some input there.
So,
yeah.
yeah. So we, myself and V, had been talking, and we say, all right, this is something we want to do. So we made we've been playing a lot of Age of Empires, and we went and made the Holy Galent Empire. We joined Galent Faction Warfare. Our ticker is Wololo, which is a lot of fun. We're playing on unaffiliated alts, so people didn't know it was Mr. V or Darkshines or other people who were out PvPing, and it was a lot of fun. Like, I think I made 10 billion ISK on my alt with blueprints, like selling blueprints and stuff for very little money. Like, you're spending maybe 20 million ISK on a frigate, and as long as, like, you die, like, there is PvP, which is awesome, and there's small gang PvP, which was really cool as well. And while there was nothing else going on in the game, lots of fun. I didn't really do faction warfare beforehand, so I couldn't tell you a comparison. But, like, we spent probably a month, I think, or a couple of weeks at least, with just going out with a group of people, like 5-10 people, and looking for fights in the area. And because it was a new mechanic and it had been changed, people were super hyped about it, and there was always targets. But, like, what I really liked about it from kind of the overall thing is that was a really good way for people to make money. Bizarrely, like, the whole, you don't make much money through PvP. Well, not the case here. Like, if you're doing sites and you kill people, you get LP. If you do the sites and manage to complete it, you get LP. Everything you'd done was geared towards putting money in your pocket, which was really cool. Like with a Tristan is what I was using, and then some Rifters and some other stuff, like all super basic stuff. 10 billion ISK at the end of it. And obviously, like, I had more knowledge than a new player and stuff like that, and so did the people we were flying with. But even still, like, if you're making 2 or 3 billion ISK over a month, just by PvPing and doing faction warfare, like, I think that's really, really good. The downside of it is it's a little bit repetitive, and there is no benefit to winning in a system. So the way faction warfare works is that you've different sides. The way where we were, it was Galent versus Kaldari. You basically push on. You go in and you do sites, and the more sites you do, the more the system flips to your side. And eventually, when it flips to 100% your side, you can kill the iHub and you claim the system. That's actually a disadvantage to your side because it moves the frontline systems from where
By the
you're
way.
making money further away.
Mm.
So the best scenario you could actually have in faction warfare is to stage in a crossroads system where you could have 3 or 4 hostile systems surrounding you that are all frontline systems, and then you undock and one jump away you're in the you're making the maximum money, you're getting the most likely areas to fight in and stuff like that. So, and even taking an iHub, like, you can go in and spend 10 minutes taking a small site and winning that small site. and I think you walk away with about 20k LP or something like that, maybe 15k LP. If you put all the effort into flipping an iHub, and by the way, these things have HP, so it's not a case you're just undocking and like in a rifter and going and shooting this thing. You have to have a fleet to do it. You get, I think, 700 LP or something. So that's one part that they just haven't upgraded at all in faction warfare. So I really think there needs to be a reason
Do you have
for
any
you to
ideas?
take space. Sorry.
Do you have any ideas, like something like what could they do to
Yeah,
give
like
more incentive?
I mean, it'd be a multiplier, right? But I know there was in the previous faction warfare, the mechanics they had something that benefited you getting more space, but all that happened then was people would swap sides, so everyone would join the winning team or the losing team uh,
Hmm.
to get the multiplier. But I don't have any ideas like well thought out, but I just know that there would need to be something to drive actually taking space.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, makes sense, right? Yeah, like I said, I didn't spend enough time to have like too much of insight there. Um, but yeah, I
I
agree.
know
With the like, so you say the biggest issue is the distance.
it's not a massive issue. I mean, you're talking 7 jumps, but it's more just like there's no incentive. Like you're actually putting
Yeah.
yourself at a disadvantage by taking systems. Um, but I know, like all of that aside, like for the group that we were playing with, we had 3 or 4 people who maybe wouldn't have said anything on comms before. Were we were 20 people on comms or whatever, and people were talking, and people who didn't FC before were suddenly FCing, or all these. It's basically you're turning from, like, for us it was turning from a blob into a kind of like a small gang hybrid or something, where people were doing stuff that we had never done before. So all that was really cool to see as well. Um,
Yeah.
I think that's where the main benefits have come from, right? Like all the groups that have been coming at it from a null perspective have had a lot of people step up and sort of experiment with new roles and kind of play a different part of the game, maybe at a different scale than they previously have seen from obviously comparing joining a larger format in it fleet compared to something like that.
yeah,
That said, I think that while in the context of you guys with your 20 people having a good time because of those reasons and kind of putting yourself out of your comfort zone, it being an enjoyable experience, I do think anytime the statement is it's detrimental for us to win in this gameplay mechanic, that's like just a fundamental flaw where CCP should be having sirens going off in the office saying like we've made a mistake here, something's not quite working, because
yeah.
the concept of we want you to win and take systems, like that is the definition of winning, and then when you win, it's actually objectively worse for you to win. I mean that's just bad gameplay design, right? Let's be direct about it. It's not a good system.
Yeah.
I do think that I mean, like, overall, the system is a lot of fun. And what they've put in there, like, it's very popular. Like the population in Lowsec has boomed because of it, and it's cool. It's a little bit repetitive. You have to find ways to, keep yourself going. And what I found is that with the deployment and everything, I've just lost all interest in faction warfare because I'm doing this. But maybe once the deployment's over, we'll be back and doing the faction warfare stuff again.
Yeah. What about when the allegiance system is going to be introduced? What do you think is going to happen? Is every big group in the game going to point to one faction and say like we're going to be this and this, and
I don't
then
know. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, and then the activity is going to be even higher? Or what do you think? And it will
Um,
join on Ma. Yeah, that's what I heard too.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people going to be interested in. I think it depends what way CCP play it. My hope is that the mechanic will only be live in faction warfare zones, so that if you sign up for a Mar or Galent, that it doesn't affect anything outside of the faction warfare zones,
Especially
because
thinking
that
of
could
Jitter.
cause yeah, it could cause a lot of issues for Jitta. It could cause a lot of issues for Nullsec. Like, if half my fleet is Mimitar and the other half is a Mar, what does that mean for the fleet? If the lodges, the Mimitar lodges rep the Amar DPS ships, do they get a penalty to their standings? Like, so I'm really hoping that this mechanic comes out well, because there'll be a lot of people interested in it. But I also really hope that CCP are thinking through every implication of what having individuals signing up to to a faction is going to mean for the other types of gameplay.
I think if they do it well, which and solve for the problems that you're indicating there, Shines, which I do think are some of the most important problems they have to consider when looking at it from a nullsec point of view, you'll also open opportunities to do creative things like Init going on one side and Goons going on the other side, and people having the opportunity to do things slightly differently, maybe shoot a few friends and whatnot, have a little fun in a different style of gameplay that's not so, again, join a fleet, sort of big
Not to
nullbox
try
style,
hard.
without also completely impacting them in LSEC, right? It kind of gives them a second gameplay loop they can go do and have fun with and shoot their friends and blow up spaceships in a smaller environment, low risk investment, etc. And then they can take themselves out of that and come back to null and do something different when they want it as well. I think if they do that, that's going to be really nice, because then you're going to have more, I think you'll have more friends playing together in small groups, more kind of like splintered off groups, using their main still, but kind of doing their own thing, while also allowing them to obviously keep their allegiances in nullsec as well. I'm not sure, Shines, if you've ever considered kind of what it could mean if it was a set up in a way where Init, for example, could be on the other side of Goons, and then you guys could specifically in faction warfare zones shoot each other, and the game kind of managed standings, etc., and kind of made that easy. But then when you came out of faction warfare and went into null or high sec or just missed low sec zones,
Yeah,
that was all correct and as it should be.
I think that's really like what you've hit on there is super important, and kind of there's a bit of a backstory, but essentially, if you look at Pochfin, where there's different groups, like you had Strybog and Horde and those other groups, and you had a very PvP heavy area of space. And Initiative, when we went into Pochfin a few months ago, we just found that we were having to contest blues or blobs like all the time, and it just wasn't that much fun. So when the faction warfare stuff came out and we all moved to alts, I contacted Goon Diplos and I said, "Hey, this corporation is neutral to everybody. This corporation is neutral to Initiative. This corporation is neutral to Goons. We are flying in it. If somebody comes into the faction warfare zone and they're a legitimate target, and we're not gonna be dealing with any Diplo issues." So having learned from Pochfin, we approached faction warfare when the changes came out as that corp is a standalone corporation. There is no, we're in Initiative, we're in Goons, but it is its own thing, and whoever comes into the faction warfare zone gets shot, and that's it. And I think that is the way that you have to approach stuff like that, because if you just turn
It's gonna be a
faction
nightmare.
warfare into Imperium versus Pappy on one side, it's just not going to be fun for anybody.
Yeah, the whole standing thing and like diplomatic shit, it's gonna be a nightmare then,
Yeah.
Yeah, talking about CSM Summit stuff, is there any issue or anything that you think like it might not be on anyone's radar that, for example, you want me to bring up, or like that you think needs more attention? Like, is there anything on your list?
I know Shines has some strong opinions on this, but I'll open the can of worms that is server stability and overall performance. Even as a small group, it's getting ridiculous. I mean, we made the joke just as we were getting set up here. We can see when Shines is moving in its cap fleet around, because we'll get tie-dye in the same region 10 jumps away with like 6 people in local, just because they're moving their cap fleet around. Like, that's
so is that only
fundamentally ridiculous.
But that it's only in certain regions, right? That reminds me of the whole issue with hunting. No, with hunting in threat space, for example, right? So the way I understood the issue, let me go back actually and explain what happened there. You jump out of the wormhole with 200 kikis, and you have a target, let's say 5 jumps out. 5 jumps is realistic. You can reach that and surprise it and tackle it and stuff. Usually. But if you get caught in tie-dye, you would have like obviously a significantly lower chance of catching it, right? And it would always be in threat space that happened to me, right? So I jumped the kikis out, we travel, and then suddenly we're stuck in tie-dye, and I have all the time in the world to get dictors in between and make it even longer, and then we wouldn't reach the target sometimes, right? So it was super frustrating. And so the way I understood that issue was that there's certain times, or at the time I thought that was the issue, there's certain times where the average activity in the region is calculated, and it wasn't the China time zone when it was, okay, because there's the downtime or whatever, right? And then the server would think, okay, this region has only so and so much activity anyway. It doesn't need all this computing power, and then would put it on like a Game Boy Color kind of node, right? So while other groups that are in Euro time zone, when it is calculated, get like the super awesome ultra node, right? And you wouldn't have the tighter issue there, right? Like, for example, Goon space, Horde space, Init space, where you have like a lot of activity around the clock, basically, right? And so might that be the same for those regions where it's just like usually the activity is so low that the server automatically, obviously, is all like happens automatically. The server says like, yeah, this region doesn't need a great node. It just gets like the shitty one, and you suddenly move like 100, 200 people around at times, and then you run into this issue. Is it the same
My
thing?
hope is that's how it works, because if that's how it works, then it should be a simple fix of they need to just decrease the amount of time between when they rerun that calculation.
I
That
have
is
brought that
how
issue
active
up.
these systems.
I have brought that issue up before, twice. Once on my own, really early on, and the second time when Schwo kind of come with me and said like, "This issue is still a thing." La 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 la. But nothing happened yet. So I'm asking you guys, like, do you think is that consistent with the issue you're facing? It's
I think
like,
it's definitely a part of it, but like even outside of Tenerife's, like if you're going into Delve and stuff, it just I don't know. It feels like over the last year, just a disclaimer: I'm not technical at all. I don't understand server architecture or anything like that. I know that if I want a good node, I need to request a good node, and that's about it. But if it just feels like bringing fleets through gates, the traffic control and the loading time, even in Fountain, like Fountain is like it's a heavy populated region. Um, if I bring 100 people through a gate in Fountain, the traffic control is insane. Like it just seems to have gotten worse and worse over the last year, maybe year and a half. And that's consistent across everything. Like even Vex is saying, like when we log in, if we log in heavy in Fatalis at the minute, yes, it might be on a lesser node, but it just everything about it is horrible. Like there's the loading times, stuff might not load correctly. I think you were saying that there was some problems with that Vex.
We've had a ton of issues. I mean, we've had a real world scenario where you guys had a big fleet out in Faith, and you tided us in Omist. So we're a region over, and you tided us
Yeah.
because of your movements, which we would have confirmed because we had eyes in every Omist constellation. There was nothing relevant happening in Omist at all. It was just purely the fact that your movements were there. And I think Nick D summarized it well, which is like it genuinely feels like Tenerife's and kind of the surrounding regions like Faith and Omist are all on the same node. Like it generally feels that way.
Yeah.
Like any impact in those regions is connected.
yeah,
But then equally, the other part of it as well, which I think it's just the problem with the game is like it just feels like the game is getting progressively more buggy. Like when we log in, I know a lot of the guys have been having issues where their capacitor when they log in their supers in the pos is extremely inconsistent. The what cap they actually log in when they have is different to the point where we have some guys who will log in and log out multiple times to re-roll the amount of cap that they land with, because sometimes they just land with like half capacitor.
That's
that's so weird.
that's a bug on pauses. If you interestingly, this was something that was used against us in the war by test. But if you online pause mods when you're on grid, like attacking a tower, it resets everybody's capacitor and it freaks the fuck out of the clients when you're doing it. So what people would do is when we'd be attacking towers, is they would just start onlining mods, and ships would start drifting left and right. And I mean, it's pause code, right? It's just there seems to be a thing with it.
Yeah, and then you
But
lose anchor and stuff like this. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I just think if it was just found to like if it was just Fatalis and stuff, we're after moving 700-800 people into a region that wasn't populated before. I can understand that, but it's everywhere. Like it's just it seems to be all over Eve, and like I don't. It's just that the game just seems slower. Like traffic control takes time. The amount of people who are experiencing traffic control jumping through gates, at least the feedback that I'm getting in fleets, is that everybody except me is in traffic control because I'm the one that jumps through first. But everybody else in fleets is traffic control, even with just sometimes it could be 50 people, sometimes it could be 100 people, 250 people. I can kind of understand a bit, but it seems to be consistent that you cannot jump through a gate without traffic control in a fleet.
Have you been getting the no warp UI bug, Shanes?
Yes, and it drives me fucking crazy. So you
Have
actually
you had it in caps yet?
No, thankfully.
It's a really enjoyable experience when you're warping hyper supers and titans around and you're trying to get into warp off grid. For example, when there are dreads on the grid and you're warping away, and it's like, oh, but what you see on your screen is you get no warp animation, you see nothing on your screen, but you see the grid disappear, and then you see the AU remaining on the warp indicator at the bottom of your screen decreasing. So you are in warp, but you don't see any of the effects around your animations that you're in warp, and it just looks like you're burning your MWD and just kind of going through grid to grid to grid. It's like the weirdest effect explained.
If you jump through a gate, sometimes the client doesn't seem to upgrade the graphics. You jump through a gate, there's the gate graphics, and then your overview loads, your chat channels load, and then the graphics of you load into the system on your screen. But what sometimes will happen, especially if you're jumping through a lot of people, is that they will the gate animation will continuously just be there, and you'll be sitting there waiting for the traffic control to end. But you've actually loaded. Your graphics haven't, so you can actually right click in space, warp and jump to the next gate. You'll still be on the animation of going through a gate, and then you'll end up a system over. You're after jumping through the gate, and it fixes itself. So there's a lot of yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm not technical. I couldn't, I don't have anything to base this on other than experience. And it just, to me, and the feedback that I'm getting is the servers are not in as good a place as they were 2 years ago.
All right.
And there could be reasons for that. I don't know, but
I'll do some digging. I promise. I'll do some digging. I think I already know who to poke about it. And see if there's something to it. Maybe is it like what are the chances it's just a feeling thing, but like you both are saying
there's no way it's a feeling thing because you have such a scale of in it. Yeah, but then also like for us, like from a smaller group perspective, it's just like I'm seeing it like when it gets to a point that people are like logging in and logging out again to solve issues, or we're in another region and we can see Shines has formed because we're in Taito.
Dank intel.
It's like we shouldn't have to look at our Taito meter to know Shines has been to Cap Fleet. Like that's just ridiculous.
The other thing, actually, Pando, that CCP really need to pull their heads out their arse on, and I have a lot of respect for CCP. They're still one of my favorite companies. Played the game for a long time, but please fix the fucking ESI.
Oh my god, yes.
I know there is. So first of all, obviously, like a couple of the conversations we have on here, I have to be, I can't talk about everything openly, right? Like, there's top man working on it, is maybe the easiest answer, but like, there are reasons for all kinds of things that, can't just be put out there. And, but they have an eye on it. And I want to give some credit to Kenneth, who has always been the ESI guy on CSM, right? So he has always been the guy pushing for like good stuff there. This he can't run next year, so we're looking at like who's going to replace him as the ESI guy on the CSM. But yeah, we are on it. CCP is on it, but obviously I can't promise anything.
I think what scares me is, while it's pretty cool, the whole Excel stuff, I hope that CCP don't just forgo everybody else who's done work like Alliance Alt or Zkill, or people who've put in tons and tons of their own personal time, like hundreds of hours into developing tools, and then CCP will turn around and say, by the way, we've got Excel now. Just use Excel, guys. And I don't know if that's what's going to happen, but the way they're saying, Excel is coming, please clarify that at least,
Yeah. Well, they are already making changes to punish those types of groups, though. I mean, the change recently on the endpoint that was used by Alliance Auth, but used by SIA and all these tools to detect someone's corp status, caching that for 7 days without any notice to developers, and just saying, here you go, this is now cached for 7 days, go forth and conquer, with zero notice. that's an example of a ridiculous change that has a cascading impact not only on those developers but also on the people using those tools.
That's the exact thing I can't really talk about.
And I say that knowing that there's a slight funny story behind that from our side, which is not something that is like I don't think we've ever talked about this publicly. But if any of you recall, I think about 2 weeks ago, CCP made a point where they were saying like, oh, we're having this issue with developers who are like, taking down the ESI, like really impacting performance, because of issues in their code or other things. I can't remember the exact details off the top of my head, but I can say this, that there is a part of the ESI that actually AKC actually took down unintentionally. This was an accident, but there was a tool that our fellow IT guy who's actually in it, Nifty, was working on that actually resulted in AKC getting banned from the ESI temporarily, because I think it was something to do with the contracts endpoint. Like we were trying to scan every contract in the game to detect supers and titans and stuff, usual intel purposes. But the short of it is we ended up being banned, and they sent us a nice graph that showed like average usage and then this like Mount Everest peak from when we were hitting the ESI. So I do understand like the difficulty they have, where it's like you do have people who are trying to get creative with using the ESI, and the end result is that
it's not then like not every line of code is a winner, right? Let's say it like that.
Exactly. And the result of that is like can be like we're impacted. Like for example, we know then like we impacted the performance of the ESI for everyone else, which kind of sucks. We apologize. Mistakes were made. So I appreciate it's not simple. Like I imagine that's a big part of why they made the caching change. But you gotta find a better solution than just like changing fundamental endpoints like that and saying, oh well, now you can't check someone's corp history for 7 days unless you use this other endpoint that's completely different.
Yeah.
I think there's a group of people like guys like Aaron and Ariel, and obviously Nikki as well, and like a lot of other people who are putting, like I said, hundreds of hours. And I mean, I talk to Aaron nearly every day about Alliance Auth, and he's probably sick of me at this stage. But like, can we do this? Can we do this?
I'm surprised he's still going strong, right? Like
It's
the amount of
crazy.
work that guy puts in, it's insane.
Yeah, but like none of that seems to be. It doesn't seem to matter. Like so many alliances are running things like Alliance Auth because it makes them able to manage, and it doesn't have to be a big block. Init uses it, yes, but it's also designed for smaller alliances to use. And small alliances have to have tools, or even small corporations have to have tools like these to make a lot of what they're doing in-game work, because you're always going to have an advantage if you're not organized. If you're organized than if you're not organized. So I would really like, and I've said this to people directly and everything, but if there's problems with the ESI, and there is, it would be cool if maybe they could sit down with some of these people, get a list of things that need to be fixed, and then work on them.
Yeah.
Better lines of communication, I think, is the theme there,
Yeah.
right? And that's something that, respectfully to CCP, because I agree with you, Shines, they're a company that I hold to high esteem, but like they got to do a better job of communicating across the board. And this is just one example where it's like, candidly, to me, it seems pretty low effort just to have someone sit down for an hour, once a month even, just to say, hey guys, what problems are you having? What problems are you trying to solve? Just to make sure that the product they're putting out there, that is ESI, actually is helping people who use it solve the problems they're solving, but also to make sure that it's a two-way street, right? That they understand how people are using the tools and kind of what the issues they're having using them are, so you avoid situations where they're saying, oh well, people are breaking our tools because they're using them incorrectly. Well, how about you communicate with them better and kind of work with them rather than just like not talking to them at all, right?
Yeah.
I think the communication's a big thing, and I think CCP have learned that recently. Like, it's okay to fuck up. It's okay to make mistakes. Just communicate. Like, not everybody's going to like, fire CCP Pando or fire, blah blah blah. I want this person's head on a stake. Whatever it is. Like, everybody fucks up at some stage, or everyone makes unintentional mistakes or stuff. But please just communicate.
Imagine Bjorn went to CCP and then he just calls himself CCP Pando just to fuck with me. That would have been a move.
I do want to respond to this person in your chat, Panda, that made a point saying, on a larger perspective, won't Eve be better off the harder it is to maintain super large organizations? Why should CCP make it easier to make blobs? This is actually something that I've heard a lot of times when we talk about these conversations of ESI. The reality is the same issues that you're saying impact blobs and would make it easier for them actually make it easier for the 20 to 50 man to 100 people alliances to form in low sec and null sec as well. If you don't solve the problems for those groups, the larger null sec groups have the exact same issues. So you kind of you have to solve those problems. Is the bottom line that I'm getting at here? Is like you have to be able to have an ESI that's functional, makes it easy to manage these groups. That's just the way the game has been played, and we're going to continue to be played for years to come.
I would say though, I kind of agree with the point Jogada is trying to make. I always, and I can say, see, whenever it comes to CSM stuff, I can always tell you guys what I say. And one of the things that I said before, also on the CSM, is there should be a limit to what ESI can do. You should not always put everything under the name of quality of life. Like, that's not a good approach, okay? There should be limits to what an ESI what the ESI can do, right? Organizing thousands of people, maybe it shouldn't be easy. You know what I mean? Maybe it shouldn't be easy. Sure, it shouldn't be like impossible, or like you shouldn't torture people with it because like so nobody wants to do it. But like there should be limits too, right? Like maybe, you know, it goes into the same category. Like that's why I like Ariel and Aaron, what they do with Alliance Auth. It's open to even smaller groups, right? So smaller groups can take Alliance Auth, and it's all there. The work's already done, basically. The base principle of organizing a group, like it's quickly done if you have like one guy, right? Because like small groups don't have a huge IT team. The big groups, however, they do, right? Like they do have so many people available. So I guess what I'm trying to say is like ESI, I feel like there's probably too much that it does, right? Like slim it down a little bit, put it on the basic stuff, right? But like it doesn't have to do everything, right?
So I actually do agree with that, but like the point I'm getting at there, and translate again, but I just want to say the point that I'm getting at there is not that the ESI shouldn't be changed. Like personally, I think someone came out with a wild idea on our comms yesterday of like, what happened if ESI was just turned off? I think that would cause chaos, but it'd be equally fun and hilarious and change the way the game is played. So I'm not necessarily advocating for ESI should remain the way it is, or have even more functionality. I'm just saying that whatever functionality is available through ESI, it should work and be consistent.
That is,
and how it works should be clearly communicated.
Correct, yeah. Consistency. Yeah.
But it may be obvious to us, but that is not the reality today, right? The way that ESI works today, like they just randomly out of nowhere go, "Oh, we're changing this now."
I think when people talk about groups, one of the things that I hate is the big groups versus small groups. There are valid arguments and reasons for using it, but the fact is anything that can be done in game will generally, unless it's something like specific, like what Vex and his guys do, but in terms of organization, anything that can be done will always be done better by a bigger group. So you need to make, like that person there is saying, why not make groups harder to organize when they're larger? That doesn't happen. What they should be doing, and this is something I've also said to CCP, is making it as easy as possible for smaller groups to exist. Make a lot of the stuff that we have to do with external tools like ratting taxes or, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Make all that an in-game mechanic where you can form a group of 100 people. You can generate your income using in-game mechanics. You don't have to use ESI. Like at the minute, we're pulling ESI. We're pulling the ratting that everyone in initiative does, and then there's a percentage paid to the alliance, right? Like and that's all through ESI. Whereas if that was an in-game mechanic, the ESI wouldn't be needed. And then smaller groups, the easier it is for smaller groups to do things, the easier it is for them to exist. Because if you're a small group moving into like nullsec or something, and you're not able to generate income or you're not able to organize, you are at the mercy of the bigger groups, and that's just a fact.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm not sure if that, like, I think it's basically the same. Not basically the same that what I try to like get across, but it's it has the same outcome at the end of the day, right? Like the playing field is like even. Like that's what
I'd love to.
That's what it should be like. Right?
I'd personally love to see the kill feed shut down. Just get
I would
rid of
agree
kill
with that.
mills.
Yeah,
Yeah,
what?
Well,
get
you can
rid of.
have kill mills in game, but like
You can
get
have
rid
kill
of.
modes, but give the option to share them, and don't
I,
have a tool like Zkill that allows for alliances to have like automatic posting, because
Yeah.
that adds an extra element to the game that I think would actually be more fun from you having the ability to control the information you're putting out there, and then use that to your advantage or disadvantage in certain scenarios. And equally, the person who gets killed can share their loss mail again with their alliance for the same thing, right? Gather intel, share, and communicate, and so forth. Like for our style of gameplay, that would be huge. Like the first thing we do every time we drop, the first question is always, "Has the kill been posted? Has the kill been posted?" It's something
yeah.
we actively call out on comments because it makes a huge difference.
Nicky
But
says
I
poor
think there's
squiz or get rid of Zkill. That's not what they're suggesting. They're suggesting it's just not automatic,
like
right? So you have
I
to
would
go
love
there and post them.
I would love to see Zkill change to like a player stats. So you could have your stats, but you don't have individual kills because I feel like Zkill is used to. It can also be used to shame people for kills or for losses or for stuff like so. If you get blasted all over Reddit because you lose a Moloch in Losec because you took a fight that you probably shouldn't have or you got baited or whatever, um, you're not going to do that again because the you're being shamed basically by for doing stuff in the game, and I think that is a lot of reasons why people won't take fights. Like if you look at the War Panda, do you remember how much people were putting emphasis on ISK wars? Like, oh, we won the ISK war by 20
Yeah, it's
bills,
the
so
only
we
way of
won.
measurement, though, right? See, it's like objective and then score. If the objective is, it's easily disregarded. It's easily like we didn't want that objective anyway. You can always say that. So it's always about the score at the end of the day. You know what I mean? It's the only thing
Yeah.
that can be measured. And you also remember in the war, and I've talked about that before. I always thought that was funny. That the Pabi guys had the objective. They could have still achieved it, but they had the ISK war at that moment, and that's where they said, okay, if we leave now, we win the ISK war. And then they left and ignored the objective.
Yeah.
And then we bombed them on the gate, and then they lost the ISK war. And I thought like that happened more than once. Not necessarily that we bombed them, but it happened more than once that they just like left with the option, like they could have achieved the objective, but they focused on the ISK war. And you know what? I'm not sure if that's a good or a bad thing. You know what I mean? It's like for us, it kind of helped, So it's like maybe it adds like another dimension to it that's fun. But you are right. It could also be that it shouldn't be playing a role, and it should just focus on like what is happening on grid. And at the end of the day, maybe nobody should be caring about like how much is did we kill or whatever, right? It's like
But
maybe. Yeah.
Imagine if you had Zkill for CS:GO, right? And like your stats are so fucking terrible that you just get flamed out of the game. Because like
Yeah.
when we play CS, if you walk away with 25 kills and I get 5 kills, like if people can look that up, it's
It
they
has been
can
a
look it
while
up. But
since you had like a 5-kill match.
no, but you know what I mean. Like if
yeah,
you're,
maybe you
I
wouldn't
just
have gotten to the level you're at now
I
if that was the case.
I think it's cool to look at Zkill and stuff. And this isn't about Zkill. This is about the whole, I guess, thing around it. But yeah, I don't know.
Zkill's just a vessel for these conversations because they're the de facto kill board, right? Like that everybody uses. But the larger conversation is just about the automated, I think, kill boards and the information that's posted. What I will say is like my biggest gripe with that whole thing is actually just the mentality behind it, where groups nowadays won't take fights because they go, oh, you know what? Like the odds of us winning here are like 30%, 35%, so we're not going to take the fight.
You know what's
Because
funny?
the IS score is too much risk, and it's like that for me is the saddest part of the game, because if you're not willing to take the fight and just play outnumbered and have the chance of that thrill of going, holy crap, we just dunked on these guys, we just pulled this off, this is amazing. Like, what's the point of playing the game? If you're only gonna take fights you win, what's the point?
But that's what happens a lot, unfortunately.
It's just so sad though. I get that's what happens, how the game is, and frankly, I know it will never change. But like it is very sad that like the net reality is like taking fights that you have a higher chance of losing, but if you play really well, there's still a chance that you can pull off. It should be something that I think more people feel empowered to do. not just you
So-
jumped in, you fed, and therefore you're gonna get like memed out
But-
now for 2 days straight, right?
Wouldn't you also say there were fights in the past? Right, I'm thinking back, Syndicate times, Bush Ravens, where you would have the objectives there, they're hitting our fort or whatever, and we would undock anyway to just deal as much damage as possible. And if we wouldn't have a value at the end, wouldn't that take something away from it? I'm not saying we wouldn't do it necessarily, or we wouldn't have done it at the time, but like, wouldn't that be? It would give, would take a little bit away from it. Wouldn't you say that?
I would agree. It definitely takes a piece away of it. I guess the problem here is not necessarily the values behind it per se. It's more just the mentality that comes with those values. That's really what we're getting at.
Yeah, but you don't have any way of measuring your success at the end. If you don't win the objective, you have zero way of measuring your impact in the fight. Wouldn't you say that's a problem?
Once a fight is all said and done, yes, you can look at that and go, okay, this gives us a sense of what happened.
Maybe a delay.
But you also
No.
And that's where delay is like the default thing that always comes to my mind. Like the point I'm getting is that risk calculation that you make to take a fight shouldn't always just be down to there's a 70% chance or a 60% chance that we lose the score if we take this fight, so we're not going to take that fight.
What about a middle ground? What about you get kill mails and instantly like they are right now, but it doesn't say anything about the fitting. So the intel about what is the fit someone's flying, because that's another intel thing, right? Especially when it comes to small scale guard. Like, you know, the fittings are shared there too. But like, what if like someone pimps out his stuff? Like, should people know? I mean, the dude who kills him can see in the loot, oh, there's some good stuff in there, but he doesn't necessarily know how shiny it was. So like, maybe that would take away enough of the negative parts of it, but leaves the whole, like, yeah, we killed whatever, like 20 ravens in this fight. So you still get that, you know? Would that be maybe the middle ground?
You know those influencers who go into a restaurant and they'll get like a really nice plate of food and then they just spend 20 minutes taking pictures of it instead of eating it.
And it gets cold.
Yeah. And then it gets cold and it's not nice. I think you should just have fun eating the meal instead of taking pictures and posting them on social media. That's how I feel about Zekiel.
That's such a good way of putting it. It's very true, though. I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with it too. And you know, I don't care about ISK, right? You know that very well. But I also know newbie Pando who like started PvPing in Faction Warfare. And I know that guy went back to not Z-Kill, I don't know what it was, Battle Clinic or whatever it was back in the day, to just check on like, how did I do today? You know, is it green? Is it red? For newer players, I do think it is an important kind of indicator if you're on the right path, kind of. You know what I mean?
I agree. I think it's a good way to check. You know, am I doing good? Am I doing bad? I think. You know, I guess it comes back to, for me, it's less about at the end of the day, am I green or red? It's more about how do you quantify the unquantifiable, I guess, to a certain extent, of like the risk that you took taking that fight. Because that's the bit for me that in all of these changes, the bit that I'd like to encourage and see more is like more people willing to take risks. And you know, I think I would like to think that with the way that we play the game, that we embody that. I mean, case in point, we gated supers into a dread bomb because we thought, we're gonna fuck around and find out. Like, this is gonna suck, but let's have some fun.
So,
right? Like,
yeah. So basically,
I'd like to see more people do that, right?
So basically, what you're trying to say is also, so Zekiel never tells the full story, right? So if you jump in your super, right? Just hypothetically, you jump in your super and you take a risk, and then you lose your super. Nobody sees the whole story; they just see that super on the kill board, right?
I mean, that is the case. Like, for me, like the amount of messages that I get from people who are like laughing, like, you entered your super, like you got dread bombed, you got baited, etc. It's like, actually, no. In our case, like, we watched them for 3 days straight, knowing they were bait, and then on the third day, someone called, I tackled it. Should we do it? We're like so bored. We're like, you know what? Let's just see what they've got. Let's see what they drop. It'll be fun. And we didn't even ping in it. Like, Shines can back this up. We didn't even ping in it to say we're gonna go do this. Literally, what happened is one of our guys in comms said, I've tackled it, and we went, fuck it. And we all just went in and we literally gated into system. We didn't sino in, we gated into bubbles, into sinos, at 0 on dreads, 50k away, and just started fragging. Because we just wanted to have fun, right? It was like an 80% chance that we all died there. Like, it's probably even higher, to be honest. Like, but that level of risk, I would like to see more
But
more aggressive play.
Wouldn't that be an argument for Zekiel having more information then? So maybe Zekiel should tell more of the story. For example, let's say you fight a 1v1, let's say Drekavik versus Drekavik, but then suddenly there's a Guardian falling out of warp, saving the other dude. Just a little bit, right? Shouldn't that Guardian be on your lost mail then? Saying like, oh yeah, I fought a Drekavik and a Guardian. But no, it's not, right? It's only going to say like, oh yeah, they had a Drekavik 1v1 and he lost, right? That's what it says at the end. Shouldn't that Guardian be on that mail then, right?
I mean, that's where the lack of timelines of kill mails, right, is challenging, because you don't see from a kill mail when things start. You just see how it ends. So yeah, I agree from that perspective. Like, if kill mails were more detailed, that would go to some end result. But I guess the problem here is like, maybe this is me just being blindly optimistic, but like, it's the mentality shift of like, how do you get, Shines, I'll ask you this, like, how do you get when you're FCing a fleet, to decide to take more risks? And I would already categorize you as someone who is willing to take more risks and willing to go all in more, but how do you encourage you to take even more risks, such that you as an FC can get the satisfaction of going, I took a larger risk here, but it paid off because I won? But also for your line members as well, to have a better experience, because they know, they can be more motivated, that they're putting themselves in these higher risk, more aggressive scenarios. But in exchange of that, the wins feel so much better.
Yeah, I mean, it's always like, whoever you are, fighting outnumbered and winning is always going to feel better than, I mean, look, we dropped 80 capitals on a 10-man East Wind Dread Bomb the other day, and
Una reverse card.
people were so happy because they got to fly their dreads, but like, we blobbed the absolute fuck out of them, right? I felt sorry for them, but what are you going to do? And that doesn't feel good. But if you look at Snuff, like, they are the experts on fighting outnumbered. Like, when they drop dreads and stuff, they are min-maxing the shit out of everything, and they're just absolutely slaughtering. And it doesn't matter where it is. Like, they're slaughtering stuff that's coming against them. Even big alliances like Initiative and Goons and etc. They're always going to feel better. But like, as an FC, for me, it doesn't matter. I can take fights outnumbered and I can lose. Like, I can whelp a fucking Napoc fleet tomorrow, and I might get laughed at. People might think, what the fuck was Shines thinking? But the next day when I ping, I'm going to get the same numbers again. Like, people are still going to join my fleets because I'm established. They know who I am, and hopefully people have fun on the fleets. If you're in UFC trying to learn Eve, and you take out like a Ferox fleet or a Munin fleet or even a Kiki fleet, and you feed, like, let's say Kiki fleet, you end up going in, you try for a dread, it doesn't work because you're not a known FC, you didn't get the numbers you needed, the dread managed to get out, and you're warping back to your wormhole, and then suddenly you realize that there's a smart bombing battleship on your wormhole, and you lose everybody. The next day, when you see a Navy Phoenix issue doing a crab beak and you ping for people, you're not going to get numbers. So, and a lot of that is because people are going to like take a Zekiel link to a battle report and post that and say, well, fucking look at Pando. He's in UFC. He's after taking this fleet out and he whelped 50 Kikis. Like, fuck, I'm not joining his fleets anymore. And, and that's what happens in Eve. Like, you have to make a name for yourself, and that is very hard to do when you have the other side. And I mean, we do this as well. Nobody's innocent of it. But when you have the other side using Zekiel as a psychological tool against other people, like, just enjoy the game. It doesn't matter what the odds are. Just go for it. And if you lose, you lose. If you win, you win. Fantastic.
Yeah.
But take the fights anyway, and they could be awesome.
Yeah, I talked about not exactly, but like something like that yesterday on stream too. And the way I always see it is, if you never take a fight outnumbered or that's like super risky or whatever, you kinda take every chance from yourself to ever have like a real epic fight, right? Because like, if you never fight outnumbered, if you never take a risk, then what? Every win you will ever always have is an expected win, and who is into that stuff? It's nice in the moment, but next week nobody's going to talk about that Munin fight that you had, where you had like 50% extra numbers. Like, nobody's going to remember that, right? So like, short term it'd probably be fun, but like long term, who gives a shit, right? And if you look at my kill board, ever since I did more solo stuff and so on, right, like, man, I'm losing way more stuff than I'm killing, obviously, right?
Yeah.
So And then there's still people. Can you believe this? There's still people that are like trying to shit talk you in local and whatnot, and say like, oh, like why you're running and stuff like this. I think half of them are trolling, right? Like half of them are just like maybe it gets to, like maybe Wolves might get them. But yeah, people will just link battle reports or whatever, right? And shame people into not doing it again, right? And it's just sad. You know what was a good example actually of that? You remember Squishy and DTM, and they went into Fountain, and they were soloing in some stuff, and there was a guy in a Legion, and he just built a Legion, just pifing around, having like a fun little fit and stuff like this, and he engaged them with his Legion, and they were in a Hyperion, right? Who engages a Hyperion solo? And I think a Hecate or whatever, or Drekavik, I forgot what it was. But fact is, that guy was just playing around, just having fun with it. Pimped out a Legion and just threw it at them and wanted to have like a shot at it. He died and it was pimp fit, and these guys were absolute fucking crazy and local, getting like super toxic about it. And I get it, some of it is probably shtick, whatever. Like they're playing a bit of a role and trying to be funny and kind of failed at it a bit. But fact is, that guy, they tried to make that guy feel bad about it. And I thought, man, that's so shitty, right? And when have you ever seen me form Munons? But the next 10 times these guys showed up, I formed Munons so hard, and we blocked them so fucking hard, that, I thought that was like about time they get the treatment, right? It's like, yeah, some people don't understand, like, it's just ISK, who gives a shit at the end of the day? Come on.
It's a game. Like, we're all here to have fun, and I think, we're all here as FCs, right, as well. What's our responsibility to a certain extent in the game as FCs is to create fun for other people as well, right? Like, we're content creators. That's ultimately what we're here to do. So I think trying to build the right atmosphere for that and being the right kind of FC from the way you interact with others is a big part of that. I know that was something that I would like to think my time in Goons, particularly towards the tail end of it, was something I pushed quite a lot. Is like, don't be toxic, actually work together, make other people better, grow, and help other people see more, etc. I think that's a huge thing at the end of the day. It's like, if you can, if we can create more as FCs, we can create more content for people to go out there, blow up ships, have fun, forget about the ISK, forget about everything else, just go have a good time, and just enjoy it. That's better all around. But kind of where I'm going with this is like, this all goes back around to earlier on in our conversation. We talk about all the ISK issues. People don't want to do that because their risk aversion is so high, because ISK is so hard to come by and shit's so expensive. So it kind of comes full circle, right? Like, it's it's difficult for groups to go out there right now and say, oh, you know what, we're gonna go full send, we're gonna try something, because that guy and his Legion, the Legion now costs 3 times the price it used to replace that Legion.
Yep.
I think it's a big issue.
Yeah,
it's one a lot of people don't seem to get.
And I think this might just be like a really good point to end it on, because originally I planned for an hour, right? I know we're at 2 hours. If you have any last things you want to get rid of, any thoughts, then I would say do it now. Otherwise, I would say thanks for coming on, guys. And yeah, see you guys around, I'd say.
I think the only point I will squeeze in is I know a lot of people have been roasting Eastwind continuously for what they've lost. But I think that groups like Eastwind should be given a ton of credit for going out off their own back and trying to organize their own defense fleets, how small they might be, because at the end of the day, the general consensus from Fire seems to be, screw the little guys, evacuate as much of the stuff from their core large blocks as they can. So I think people should, we're talking about people going out there and blowing stuff up and just giving it a go against all odds. Credit to Eastwind that they've kind of embodied that, right? They hit full send with their dreads twice over. Even if we did, Una reverse card them within it the second time, they gave it a go, and I think they should get a lot of respect for that.
I have more respect for Eastwind than I do for the rest of the groups that are down here, because they are the only people fighting back properly, at least, or trying beyond what they probably can.
Yeah, I think is it fair to say they've given the best fights so far? Because that seems to be the consensus that we're seeing, is like they've given some of the best fights because they've been willing to throw dreads on grid, they've been willing to do this, do that, and generally create better fights, right?
I don't think they're as poor as people might think. I mean, I've seen Molochs and Vanquishers and shit taking that regional gate on day 2 of the deployment. But at the same time, like you know, anyone who turns around and dread bombs you while like if you know dread bombs the invaders while outnumbered is I mean, they're doing something right in my book. I think.
100%.
Why not? What else
All
are
right.
they going to do with it? Evacuate the curse?
Yeah, we've been telling them all week. What are you gonna do? Just everything is being burned down around you. You haven't done anything a week. We've hit full SARs. We riffed your keep. You didn't undock. They had one person in local when we riffed their keep star. So for them to finally kind of log in and actually go full send with a plan, which was pretty well executed in their defense. I mean, what people don't know is that when my super died, we had 2 other supers warp out in like 10% structure or something. So like it could have been much worse. So I think yeah, they should get a lot of credit for what they tried to do. So.
Yep. Shout out to Eastwind, I'd say. Yep.
If I can just put in, if any groups, and I've already had 1 or 2 reach out to me, you don't have to reach out to me. I don't want anything to do with this. But if groups who are currently losing their space in the south want to leave fire and try and make it by themselves or do their own thing in nullsec once we leave, the space will all be left open for groups to come in and do their thing. So if people want to give it a shot without some toxic leadership like Eastwind or whoever, then more power to you.
There you go. That's the offer on the table. I'm curious to see who's gonna take advantage of it. But I guess we'll find out in the next month or so. Provi 2.0, someone says. Yeah, I mean Provi is a little bit more reachable. So, but at the same time, it started with Fate Doublers, but it probably is not going to stay at Fate Doublers, right? So like all these regions are going to be pretty open. So there's going to be some good space. Immensity is pretty reachable from Curse.
I mean, these are all like you've got Great Wildlands and Curse, and you've got like most of these regions are at least in range of those places. So it's not great, but it's definitely possible.
It's definitely a good space.
It's a start, and like there are people in this game who are. I was reading a Reddit post of someone who used Thera connections exclusively to run their industry train. There are people who will put in the time to be able to live in something like Faith and Omis to make it work while being disconnected from the rest of the map. So it's somewhere to start. It's a new challenge, and I encourage people to take the challenge, because at the end of the day, going out on your own and trying to build something from the ground up versus just with all due respect to Shines and frankly where I spent my time as well, just joining a fleet and shooting a target. It's a different way to play. I think a lot of people will enjoy that. So I would encourage people to consider that and consider trying to participate in something and build something if they can. It's a very unique opportunity, but I think a very special opportunity.
All right.
Even if it doesn't work, I'll say as well. Right? Sometimes it ends in a blaze of glory and you just all die. But
well,
that's how it be.
That's how it has to be sometimes.
Oh, actually, can I just add one more thing, Panda?
Sure. Let's do another hour. Fuck it, guys. Let's go.
So I'm just wondering, do we have a 5-man team for CSGO after this or no?
I'm in. I don't know if Bjorn's still here.
Bjorn was in the chat. I seen Bjorn in the chat. I want an answer from Bjorn. Sorry. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, guys. Thanks for coming on. Good stuff. And yeah, see you guys around. And big thanks to the guys who stopped. Try unplugging it. Gene, Veer, and I forgot who else it was at the beginning. Thanks for the biddies. Try unplugging. And yeah, guys, next episode of FC Chat, I'm working on something. It's going to be episode 99. So, get hyped. That's all I can say. Raffle? No, we're not going to do a raffle. It's going to be, it doesn't fit quite. I'll raffle some more shit tomorrow. Okay, guys? So, see you guys tomorrow. And thanks for hanging out. Bye-bye.